What is up, everyone? We're back for the Deep Drive Pod for episode number 78. Today's episode is going to be centered around first baseman. Kind of a weird position in the sense that, first base defense is one of those things that kind of gets overlooked. But in the same vein, it's like
It
how,
doesn't matter.
it doesn't matter, but it's like, I guess it kind of like, it's one of those things, but it's a position ripe full of good offensive players, which is fun to see. Definitely not, I don't really like positions that we don't have great hitters in because they're just boring as shit. And defense, quite frankly, is very fickle to deal with in the first place. So you can kind of just ditch your DRS, ditch your OAA, ditch your UZR, and let's just look at offense here. But James, I think that we have a pretty talented position here in first base. I think it's gotten better over the last few years. There have been some young players that have emerged. There have been some guys who have maintained being a superstar even past their age 30 season. So kind of let's get started with this list.
Yeah, so just to hop right into it, coming in at number 10, we have Anthony Rizzo of the New York Yankees. And Rizzo's a guy who is now entering his age 34 season. Age 33 season, I believe. Coming off of a great year last year, right? 133 WRC plus. Not the best batting average, which is kind of uncharacteristic for him. He used to be a 300 hitter kind of year in, year out, at least close, 280, 290. And this year, just 224, but he slugged higher than he has since 2019, which was the best, second best year of his career, offensively at least. Maybe not. That's a stretch. He had a few. But anyways, you look at Rizzo, and he's a guy who plays well for that ballpark. He fits well. And, he kind of does everything that you would want him to do. He gets on base. He hits home runs. He plays somewhat decent defense. It's kind of fallen off recently in the past few years, but that's kind of just, he's aging. What do you really expect from him? He's the number 10 first baseman in baseball right now. What are your thoughts, Ryan?
Yeah, so, he's kind of changed, as you mentioned, the batting average approach. He's kind of gone for more fly balls than the line drives and ground balls, which I think is kind of the play at this point. We'll see how the shift affects him. I don't want to sit here and say, Anthony Rizzo is going to go out and start hitting 250, 260 with a fly ball approach, but maybe see a couple points here and there in the OBP and batting average. I think that'll offset what was a career best year in isolated power. And I don't think he's going to sustain that next year, just, based on the fact that you can't really expect a player to repeat having their best year in terms of just raw power numbers. But when you're looking at Anthony Rizzo, I think he's just kind of the definition of he's just a solid first baseman. I don't think he's here because he's not that good. I think he's more so this is more so a product of a lot more talent at the position. This position's loaded with guys who can put up really good offensive numbers and play a little bit better defense or, hit a lot better. So I view Rizzo as just a solid first baseman. So I think it's a good spot for him.
Yeah, and like you were saying, there's a lot of first basemen in the league who could be worthy of this list. A couple, just to name a few. I meant to do this before, honorable mentions. Rhys Hoskins is a guy who I think was pretty close for all of us to make this list. Christian Walker made my list, did not make our cumulative list. And then I had one more. Oh, Josh Bell. Josh Bell had an incredible year last year. And he made Jack's list, but did not make the top 10 for our cumulative list. Now, coming in at number 9, we have new Houston Astros first baseman Jose Abreu. And Abreu, like Rizzo, is another guy who's kind of aging, but his bat is still there. He had a 138 WRC plus last year. He was, I think, one of the best hitters in the entire league in the second half last year. He got off to a slow start. And you move a guy to Houston, and you expect them to hit well because everyone hits well in Houston.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, you expect the power to get better. Last year, he landed 141 ISO, only hit 15 home runs. That's just not very Jose Abreu. You know what I mean? This is a guy who is kind of always been, a big home run guy. The lowest home run total of his career up to that point was 22 in 2018 when he just played 128 games. Even in 2020, he had 19 in 60 games. So he's just kind of always been a big slug guy. I think going to Houston is going to help him in that regard. I don't know if the batting average will sustain, but I mean, there's a world where he's able to, hit maybe hit 304, or hit, even 280, and the power kind of comes back and you see one of those ridiculous WRC plus numbers, maybe a 135, 140, and the defense isn't bad. It isn't like good, but it isn't bad. So you're not really looking at someone who you're concerned about becoming kind of a brick there. I think Josh Bell, when you mentioned Josh Bell's like honorary mention, Josh Bell could be so bad defensively at first base. You're like, him and Abreu could put up similar WRC plus numbers, but Abreu will be the significantly more valuable player. I think him above Rizzo is kind of just like, he's not, they're both not great defenders, but Abreu's kind of been the better hitter for a little bit for a good stretch now. So even in his advanced age, I feel pretty confident with putting him 9 on this list.
Yeah, and coming in at number 8, we have great. Why is this not loading? We have Ty France of the Seattle Mariners. And France is a guy who I was higher on than you guys, but he's one of the best younger first basemen in the league. I feel like this is a pretty old position, right? You see a lot of guys move to first base, and France has been there. He plays solid defense. He has a great bat. He does not walk, which is really like the real one concern with his game. He doesn't homer much either, but he gets a ton of base hits, right? He had a 126 WRC plus 2.4 WAR last year. Not amazing, nothing special, but he gets the job done, and he's one of the best first basemen in the league because of it.
Yeah, last year was weird because he got off to like a really good start at 148 WRC plus entering the All-Star break, and then he kind of slumped after that. He had some injury issues. Quite frankly, I wouldn't be stunned if he beats that 126 WRC plus mark we saw last year. I think him being younger allows me to sit back and say, I think he'll, going into next year, you don't have to expect any regression from him the way you kind of would be regressing a little bit with Rizzo and Abreu. So that's why I had him, higher than those two on the list. I know that I was a little bit lower than him as compared to you, James, but I think it's more so how I view other guys' position. And again, less so a knock on Ty France, more so an uplift for the other guys we'll mention on this list.
Yeah, coming in at number 7, we have a guy that I was much lower on than you two, which is Nathaniel Lau of the Texas Rangers, entering now his age 27 season after a couple actually really good years for Texas after Tampa Bay traded him, which normally you don't see. He had a 143 WRC plus last year, which at the position ranked, I believe, 4th in the league. Yeah, 4th in the league, tied for 3rd. And I think the reason I'm a little lower on Nathaniel Lau is I don't know if I'm fully bought in on the fact that he's actually this good of a hitter. But, looking at what he's done, there's really not, other than the xWOBA being lower, which is a little concerning, especially given that ballpark. You'd expect it to be the other way around, where they kind of underperform their numbers. He overperformed them. I think he's due for a little bit of regression, and I believe Steamer agrees with me. 132 versus 143 last year, which isn't a huge difference, but I think it's big enough. I ranked him below guys like Ty France, Jose Abreu. So, I think 7's a pretty reasonable spot for him. He's kind of come into his own as a hitter recently, so I don't hate it.
Yeah, for Lowe, it's I definitely agree that he's not going to repeat a 143. I think the BABIP also screams out a little bit here. He's a career 349 BABIP guy, so you kind of feel like he's going to have a way higher BABIP than average, but 363 doesn't seem like that's a sustainable number. That is the highest.
And maybe he's one of those not left field guys, left-handed hitter guys who will kind of benefit from the shift a little bit, right? I think he hits a lot of ground balls on line drives. He doesn't hit a ton of fly balls. He had 27 homers last year. But yeah, like he had a 48% ground ball percentage last year and 55 the year before that. So he does hit a lot of ground balls per fly ball at almost 2 over the past couple of years.
Yeah, and ultimately, again, even without shift, I just don't think 363 is necessarily sustainable, but I do buy into him being a really good hitter. I think, compared to France, Abreu, Rizzo, I think we'll have the highest WRC plus of the 4. The big concern here is the defense is clearly the worst of the 4. It's really bad at first base. But I'm inclined to feel as if the bat is going to outweigh the defense, but I think we're still at that part of the list where any ordering of this 4 won't really drastically have me feeling one way or the other. If you had Low, I believe you said below Abreu in France, can totally see that for next year, right? I wouldn't be stunned if those two guys are better than Low. But I feel confident that Low's bat is going to be good enough to carry him above the rest.
Yeah. Coming in at number 6, we have Matt Olson of the Atlanta Braves. And admittedly, I think this is like really like badly low. I think Jack ranking him at 7 dragged this down to 6. I had him at 4. No, I had him at 5, and you had him at 6. So, not a huge difference, but yeah, I definitely think Olsen is a little underrated here. This is a guy who a couple of years ago we were talking about as the best first baseman in baseball, right? Not obviously not the best year from him last year, overall. He didn't play as much. I think didn't he get hurt last year if I remember correctly?
Well, you played 162 games. I think he might have been, maybe he was dealing with something during the year, but
Am I looking?
he,
I just completely missed him. So I thought he was
yeah.
unqualified because I'm looking at the qualified hitters. He wasn't there. I take that back. He did not get hurt last year. He just wasn't. I just didn't see him. Yeah, 120 WRC plus last year, huge down year, right? Especially given 147 the year before and 135 the year before that. But the one thing we do say about Olsen that we can't say about other guys is that he's legitimately an elite defender at first base, which you normally don't find. And I think that really boosted me. It's a shitload of homers, 34, 39 the last 2 years. I think this is a really low ranking for him. I would like to see him in the top 5. I think you could put him at number 4, and I don't understand how you could rank him under Nate Lowe, but here we are.
I can't put him. I can't put him over low, under low. Quite frankly, I don't think the gap between WRC plus next year for low and Olsen is drastic enough to outweigh any, like, the defense right there is such a massive swing. We're talking, I know we mentioned defense doesn't really matter for the position. We're talking
talking about a 20-run swing here. That's 2
right.
wins.
Like
this is a
that matters
huge
too
difference.
much. Yeah, and then for the offense, I mean, Olsen ran a 116.8 max exit velocity. I want people to understand, we're pushing, that crazy level of power. It's like unique. You know what I mean?
I don't like. I think you rely on this max exit velocity too much because you could just it's one batted ball, right?
Right.
All you need is 1.
90th percentile is definitely a better metric.
It's definitely a better metric for sure to look at their 90th percentile exit velocity. I fully agree with you.
I'm pretty sure his 90th percentile ranks pretty well as well. And, in terms of hard rate, hit rate, barrel rate, it all kind of lines up. I don't think it's a situation where he just had one really hard hit ball and everything else kind of just fell apart. I think Olsen hits the ball hard, and he does so with, typically he has a fly ball heavy approach. So being able to consistently elevate the ball in the air with high exit velocities is important. The strikeout rate was high last year for his compared to 2021, which is interesting. I don't think we'll see that again. I think we're going to see a return to, right around league average strikeout rates. The walk rates kind of was low compared to his career norms last year. I think that'll climb up a little bit. No big distinction in BABIP, though. Maybe that could change next year with different shift rules. But his batting average and OBP plummeted. I don't know. It was a weird year for Matt Olson. I think we could totally see him climb up this list. Maybe I'm overreacting in the sense of putting him at 6, but I also don't think it's as much about him not performing well as much as it is, I think, other guys ahead of him have taken either steps forward or have just consistently always been better than him. So that's kind of my reasoning for having him where I did on the list.
Yeah. I think maybe I was overreacting a little bit too to him being this low. I don't think it's that low. It's one spot lower than I had him. I just think that the guy we have above him, Vinny Pasquantino at number 5 is just, I think that's ridiculous, to be honest with you. To call at this point in their careers him a better player than Matt Olson, who we know is an established guy. And I'm not one to be like, oh, the established guy. We've gotten so many comments on our Twitter post about how Adley Rutschman is too high because JT Realmuto is more established. There's a difference between that type of established where we've kind of Adley Rutschman is an established, very, very good catcher, best catcher in baseball, to be honest with you. Vinny Pasquantino, not so much. He has great batted ball data, right? That's kind of his MO, right? That's what he's known for. He absolutely hits the piss out of the ball, right? But we're looking also at the same time at a guy who had a 137 WRC plus last year. He's projected 140. I just don't know if I fully expect that out of him, especially given he was never a top prospect, right? He wasn't a guy that it's different when we're looking at a guy like Adley, who's kind of been the number 1 prospect in baseball since the day he was drafted, and then Pasquantino, who's a guy that, you know, you're not exactly so sure what you're going to get from him. Also, he's already 25. So I think that's another big thing is like, yeah, he's a rookie, but he's also a 25-year-old rookie. So, I mean, I don't know.
I don't think he's going to get much better. Like, I don't think this is a guy where like, okay, he had a 137 his first 72 games, so it's going to get even higher. Like, that's not how I view. Think like Adley, I legitimately think we could be viewing. I think we're going to get like an 8-9 more year out of Adley at some point in his
Oh yeah,
career.
at some point, I think we will be looking at Adley as like a consensus top 5 player in baseball.
Right. Or like even J Rod. Like you look at J Rod, you're like, he was like,
oh yeah, we look at like I think
you know
J Rod
I mean?
has
J-Rod
this
could
might
be
be a stretch, but J Rod could have an 11-win season. Just the way he
No,
plays
I don't
defense and hits,
disagree.
like I don't think that's really
And the
like
base
he could
running?
have a year like Josh did last year. Maybe not so much offensively, but definitely
I think
better defensively and better on the bases.
the
So
comp I'm looking for is that Mookie Betts 2018 for J Rod, but I'll save my
or
J Rod
that
love.
I think more the 2012 Trout, but
That's a good. I love that comp as well. Both of those years were really good. But
but
the
yeah,
thing with
we'll get to
Pasquantino,
center field later.
the thing with Pasquantino, I can't do this,
I
man.
don't. I think it's Pascantino. I don't know. I'm
uh,
not Italian.
But one
You're
of
not
the big
Italian.
things is he can walk more than he strikes out. I think like he just didn't whiff. Like typically you see a guy come up and they struggle with that. He does not swing and miss, man. And he's a guy who lifts. He's not like a guy who doesn't lift the ball in the air either. He puts the ball in the air. I'm concerned about how the ballpark is going to play with his home run totals, but even at first base, small sample size, of course, 306 innings isn't crazy. -2 DRS, 2.3 UZR, 1 OAA. I don't think defense is going to be like a massive issue the way we see it with like Nate Lowe, where like Lowe can legitimately like have like a 150, like not 150, 130 WRC plus and a well below 3 WAR year and kind of tank the rest of his value because he's a really bad defensive player. He's a brick back there. And kind of like how Christian Walker can be like last year, he wasn't like a crazy hitter, but he was one of the best first basemen in baseball because he's just that good of a defender. But Pasquantino, dude, he's going to be, his defense is not going to play a factor into this. His offense is so good. I mean, the projections obviously stand out, but if you look at the minor leagues, you mentioned he's never really been a top prospect. It's kind of hard for first baseman to rank in that, past, into the top 10 or 20. I mean, inherently thinking about it from the sense of, if you're giving these future value grades, can you really give a first baseman that like 6 WAR future value grade? Like, can you really do that to them first baseman getting?
I think it depends. Like if you're looking at a guy like when we were looking at Vladimir Guerrero Jr. coming up, obviously he came up as a third baseman, but as a first baseman, I would have given him that grade 100%. But
I don't know if he would have gotten that grade as a first baseman.
We're not
I'm just saying like
about
prospects.
I think it was kind of looking at Guerrero as a prospect, it was kind of inevitable that he moved to first base. He moved to first base his fucking rookie season. Like he played third base for what, 2 weeks? Like
no, I mean, but I also, the way I view is like Vlad, and we'll get to Vlad later. Vlad is like gonna be a Hall of Famer. Like we are 3 years, 4 years. He's gonna be like he just doesn't
right. And
like I don't
obviously
think
Pasquantino is not that guy.
I'm not talking about Vinny P the way I'm talking about Vlad in the sense of like this guy's gonna be a sustained like for the next 10 years.
I just disagree with what you said, where you were like, I don't know if I could rank a first baseman that high as a prospect. I disagree with that.
I'm just saying I don't know if I'm not saying I don't know if I could. I'm saying I don't think prospect sites like putting first baseman that high in general. Like he was ranked as a 79th best prospect in baseball. Coming into 2022, he had a 152 WRC plus in AA and walked more. He struck out at the age of 23. Like this isn't like an old guy going to AA and just killing it. Like he was clearly going to be, and even in AAA, like he, 139 WRC plus, walked more. He struck out. I mean, like the guy just mashes, right? Like he just doesn't. All he's done is hit. And it's, I mean, I guess Torkelson, I guess you can say is the exception. I guess that's like the exception of like guy who comes up and was like given a lofty comparisons, good FV, really good FV, and that situation there. But is Vinny P like what does Vinny P do poorly offensively? Is there anything he doesn't do well offensively? There isn't. Like there's nothing like Olsen. Not that Olsen can't be a better hitter than him, but I don't think we're looking at a guy that like he has
Olsen
better
strikes out all the time.
Like he has better play discipline, better hit tool, similar power tools. Like I've got to give it to Vinny P offensively. Though I do think the defense with Olsen can definitely allow him to to kind of
especially like, and I know what you're saying. It's not a big deal at first base, but Olsen is so good defensively at first base.
It's like if you put them within 5 WRC plus points, Olsen's clearly going to be the better player. But the way I view it is like Vinny P. It's weird that a guy who is so a guy like Vinny P is projected to be, a top 10 hitter in baseball. When I know projection, Steamer can overrate, AAA players, but you don't see them overrate them to the point where they're throwing guys who have no business being, 140 WRC plus hitters with the 140 WRC plus. We're talking about very, very rarely do you see that. He's got this, like, it's just tough for me to feel any type of way that isn't this guy is really damn good. But I understand your hesitancy to put him over Olsen, where this isn't just like an established player versus a non-established player. This is a guy who's like, Olsen is a guy who used to be considered, someone who could be the best first baseman in baseball. He's only a year removed from being arguably the best first baseman in baseball. And Pasquantino, we kind of have to see, one, how does he hold up over a full season defensively? Two, what does Olsen look like next year? And three, is he taking a step forward, or is he just kind of the same hitter he was last year?
Yep. Coming in at number 4, we have Mets first baseman Pete Alonso. I think from here we kind of have like a consensus.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's going to be hard to disagree with at least the 4 guys, right? Like you can argue about the order of the top 3 where it's like, maybe you think Goldschmidt's the best or Guerrero's the best, but I think Pete Alonso is the clear-cut number 4 first baseman in baseball. He's not as good as the top 3, and he's better than everyone below him, right? You look at Alonso, this guy, he hits nukes. That's what he's on the field to hit nukes, and he does. He slugged 518 last year, ISO of 246, which I think was which was the 3rd best at the position last year, behind only Goldschmidt and Rizzo. And obviously, the reason why Rizzo's ISO is so high is because he doesn't hit for average. Alonso, on the other hand, does hit for average, with a 271 batting average last year, 354 xWOBA, 143 WRC plus, 4-win season. And, Alonso, I think, is consistent, right? Where you're like, he's a 140, 145 WRC plus hitter, and that's who he is. That's who he'll be. He's a 4-win player, and there's not really much to talk about there.
Yeah, he also cut down his strikeout rate over the last 2 years. Got it well under 20%. Well under 20%. Last year was the lowest strikeout rate of his career. Hit 40 home runs. I mean, like you said, he's on the field. It's just drop tanks, and there's a certain beauty to just a guy who just goes out there and just fucking hits nukes. You know what I mean?
I think the Mets need one more Pete Alonso.
I think every team could use, not obviously every team could use a Pete Alonso, but like there's just
there's not a team in the league that you give Pete Alonso to and they're like, no, I don't want him. Even a team with a superstar first baseman, you give the Dodgers Alonso, they want him. You give the Cardinals Alonso, they want him.
Like that. They'll move. Yeah. They'll do some, like, the way I look at it is
Alonso has such a good bat that there's no way not to put him in the lineup. I'd put him at second base. I don't care. He's such a good hitter.
I mentioned Vinny P not really having a flaw. Like, okay, Pete Alonso legitimate. Like, he walks at a good rate. He doesn't strike out anymore. He hits the absolute piss out of the ball. He plays a ton of games. He's extremely consistent. Like, outside, obviously, defense is going to limit his ceiling, and there are guys ahead of him that are, just freak talents, right? Hall of Fame caliber players. But Pete Alonso is just like really damn good. So I think that's kind of my final thoughts on Alonso there.
Yep, I definitely agree with you there. Looking now at number 3, we have coming in at number 3, we have Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I know you had him at number 1, which I don't disagree with at all. Like, I didn't put him at 1, but I also don't think that Guerrero Jr. is, like, I think the difference between 1, 2, and 3 here is marginal at best, right? We can't say like there's a huge difference. We're talking about a guy who won MVP, right, last year. We're talking about a guy who finished second 2 years ago, and then we're talking about another guy who won it 3 years ago. Like, these are MVP candidates kind of year in and year out at this point. Guerrero Jr., obviously, I got off to a pretty poor start last year. And then he was kind of on fire for the second half, right? I think I could get the splits up real quick if I want to. But we're talking about a guy who is 23 years old right now. He's entering his age 24 season. Did I mix that up? He had a better first half than second half is what I meant. Yeah, but you look at Guerrero Jr., and this is a guy who is going to be a top 10 hitter for the next 10 years, right? Yeah, he's that good, and he's going to continue to be that good. So I don't really think there's much of a flaw in his game either. You'd like him to hit the ball in the air more. He's figured that out a little bit. He had 32 home runs last year. He's pretty much good for 30, 35 home runs a year at this point. I would be shocked if he had any less, unless he gets hurt, obviously. But he doesn't get hurt. That's the other thing. That's the thing about Guerrero. These top three, completely, all three of them, really, they don't miss games. And I know it's an easy position to do that, right? First base. But they do not miss games. Guerrero only, I think, missed 1 or 2 games last year, and then 1 or 2 games a year before that. He's playing 160 games a year. And there's a lot of value to that I think a lot of your typical advanced stats people may not give him credit for. I think just generally speaking, I care more about volume than almost anyone, but I think you look at Guerrero Jr. and you kind of know what you're going to get. You're getting an elite bat with a bad glove, and you're okay with that. I think next year, so he's projected 161 by Steamer, which is a wildly high projection, but I think it's fully warranted. Like, 161 is Trout level projection, right? But I don't see a reason why he couldn't be that good next year.
Yeah, the way I look at it with Vlad is like when we're talking about these next group of first baseman, Vlad is very clearly the one that can't contribute the other two facets of the game that these two ahead of him can. Like Freeman and Goldschmidt are just better base runners and better defenders. So I can totally see that from the, stepping back and saying, if these three guys put up the same WRC plus next year, who's going to be the better player? Like Vlad's going to be player 3 in that group. The way I look at it is I think he's going to, I personally think he can live up to those projections. I think some people forget, this is a guy who, as mentioned, he's entering, he's still in his early 20s. Players don't peak at 23 typically, or 22, or you kind of hope they don't. The power is generational, right? In terms of just raw power. I know that this isn't a number, but like there are only certain guys who can stand like home runs where it's like a line drive that's like 10 feet off the ground and somehow gets out. And Vlad can do that. And it's quite entertaining to watch. But ultimately, I'm not too phased by this year. I think that next year is going to be, even if it's not 160, I think 145, 150, I think somewhere in that range. But he can't contribute on the field the way the other two guys can. So that's kind of where like coming into last year, I've been like, you're crazy for not having him one. This year, I'm more like, take a step back, Freeman and Goldschmidt can provide in ways that Vlad can't. So I can see the argument against it there.
Yeah, but we're also talking about with Guerrero, a guy who he could put up 200 and I wouldn't be that surprised.
I think if you ask everyone coming into 2022, okay, someone put up a 200 WRC plus and hit 60 home runs. I think Vlad's name might have come up before Judge's. And I don't think that's a slight to Judge. I think coming into 2022 with the information we had, coming off the year he just had at the, entering the age, it would have been, maybe it was Soto, maybe it was Vlad. You know what I mean? Like it would have been those two.
I would, if that's where the 60 home runs thing comes in, because
60 home runs, I would have gone Vlad. Because
if you're talking about that, like 200 WRC plus, Soto had a 200 WRC plus.
Yeah.
Obviously that was in a short season. And I'm like, that's the number one guy who I think next year Soto will lead the league in WRC plus.
Oh yeah, I mean he's ridiculous. But the home run thing, Vlad, yeah.
The home run thing, like Vlad will lead the league in homers before Soto will. Soto will never lead the league in homers. It's just not the way he plays. He might lead he'll lead the league in walks, he'll lead the league in on base percentage, he'll lead the league in WAR, maybe offensive value, definitely WRC plus, whatever. He will not lead the league in home runs. It's just not the way he plays. Yeah. Moving on at number 2. And by the way, in our vote points, we give, I think we've gone over this before, but we give, if you put a guy at number 1, he gets 10 points. If you put him at number 2, he gets 9, etc. These 3 guys, we have Freeman and Goldschmidt are 28 and 27, and then Guerrero's at 26, coming at number 2, like I just said. Paul Goldschmidt, who won the MVP last year, he got 9 points from each of us. Every single one of us had him at number 2 on our list. And every single one of us had him at number 2 on our list. And I think Goldschmidt is, like he won MVP. What can you say about that?
Yeah. He's put up a 177 WRC plus. Like, I mean, and last year, I know he didn't get off to the best start in 2021. They just like completely turned it on. It was like the best hitter in baseball. I mean, for I know 2020 is not a full season. I get it, but since 2020 he has a 156 WRC plus, which is just kind of and not just kind of it's insane, right? He's a remarkable defensive player. He's still a really good base runner. I know last year OA didn't like him as much defensively, but DRS still liked him. I'm still gonna go with he's a good defender until all 3 of the stats have this marriage of he's not a good defender.
Well, yeah, especially because of the reputation he's
Yeah, I
built
think
for
reputation
himself and like the
matters,
track record, and especially with defense. I think track record on defense matters more than
especially at first
anything.
base.
Yeah, because like it's so tough um to judge a first baseman's defense, right?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And so I mean, like it's what do you trust? What do you not trust? I think I would trust that Goldschmidt is a good defender and will continue to be a good defender.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't have any quarrels with. I mean, I have no quarrels with like Goldschmidt. I could say like, okay, maybe he's the best first baseman in baseball. Like the gap between him and Freeman is they're like the same player almost. Like Freeman's kind of just like the left-handed Goldschmidt in most like when we're kind of stepping back and thinking about it. Both are ridiculous hitters. Both are good defenders. Both are similar in age. I think Goldschmidt is 35 and
I think he's a couple years older.
yeah, Goldschmidt's 35, Freeman's 33. They're legit. They're exactly 2 years apart, almost 2 years and a couple days, here or there, because it's September 10th for Goldschmidt, September
Yeah,
12th
I
for
don't care what
Freeman.
their birthdays are.
But they're not like we're not talking about a 40-year-old and like a 25-year-old. We're talking about two guys kind of in the same stages of their career. Pick whoever you like more. You know what I mean? At that point, it's like hell. If you like the color red more, just pick Goldschmidt. It's really that razor thin, in my opinion.
Definitely agree with you there. I think between one and two was probably, I mean, one, two, and three, like I said, and on this list are completely interchangeable. If you put Vlad at one, if you put Goldschmidt at one, you put Freeman at one. I don't care. Like these are the three best. You could tie them all for one. Like for all I care. They're they're that good on on offense, really. You look at Goldschmidt MVP last year. Did he deserve it? I don't know. I would have given it to Machado, but there's, like it's not egregious, right? That he won it, and I don't even think it's bad. I don't think it's or anything like that. Goldschmidt is a guy who's going to give you 30 homers. He's done it 5 years in a row. He's going to give you a 300 average. He's done that 2 out of the last 3 years. He's going to slug 500. He's done that 7 times in his career. He's going to give you a 150 WRC plus. He's done that every year. Seamer's on a little low on him at 140. I think part of that is his age. I don't fully believe that he's going to drop off that much. But it's tough to argue with him. He's a future Hall of Famer, and he is for us the number 2 first baseman in baseball, leaving number 1 as Freddie Freeman. Obviously, you can't argue with it, right? Freddie Freeman is a guy who has won an MVP. He's finished top 3, I think, a couple other times. He had another 7-win season last year, and I think he kind of went under the radar a little bit. He was never really getting that, MVP conversation that Goldschmidt, Arenado, and Machado were having. Even though Freeman was right up there with them. 160 WRC plus last year. He actually underperformed his xWOBA again, which he's done now, 5 years in a row? Yeah, 5 years in a row. It's actually kind of unreal that he's done it 5 years in a row. 10 points 5 years in a row, actually. 10 points in 2018, 19, 20, like 40 points in 2021, and then another 10 this year. He adapted so easily to LA. It wasn't, any type of a lot of the times, like we say, when you get a superstar changing teams, you'll see like one down year. We saw it with Lindor, we saw it with Machado, but we didn't see it with Freeman, right? And here we are, we're looking at him. He 12% walk rate, 14% strikeout rate, 330 batting average, 511 slugging percentage, 160 WRC plus. That's what he is. He's an elite hitter, and it's really tough to argue with.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is a player who's going to waltz into the Hall of Fame the same way Goldschmidt will. When is the last time Freddie Freeman hasn't been not just a good player, like an amazing player? Like, as long as I've remembered baseball, Paul Goldschmidt as well, but Freddie Freeman's never had a WRC plus below 132 since 2013. We're in year 10 now of that stretch. If he puts up a 130 WRC plus, we'll have 10 years of a 130 or better WRC plus. Last year, he kind of, didn't have the same power numbers as usual, but that's fine because he decided to have more line drives and, he cut down his whiff rate, he's cut out his strikeout rate. He hit for a higher average. His OBP was ridiculous. Like, Man, he's a rare guy who can go 300, 400, 500 any given year. Again, he remains steady as a rock defensively. He's a very underrated base runner because, at least according to BSR, he stole 13 bases last year and 16 attempts. And he doesn't really hit his double plays at the frequency you expect a lumbering first baseman to.
But he's also not a lumbering first baseman.
Yeah, you would expect that's what you would expect. You think, okay, close your eyes. He's 33. He's going to be 34 next September. Open your eyes. Freddie Freeman's still a great defender and still a great base runner. I mean, I don't think, again, as you mentioned, we've kind of hammered this point with all three of these first basemen. As long as these three are in your top three, all three of them, of course, you're fine. If one of these guys are not in your top three, your list is wrong. That's how I think I view this. You know what I mean? I think Alonso's the clear bridge between
the elite and the good.
Yeah,
right. And I think there's 3 elite first basemen, there's 1 great first baseman, and there's a bunch of good first basemen. And I think that bridges Alonso, and I'd almost put Olsen in that great tier with him. Like, he's like right there.
The funniest thing
maybe
is,
I would put those 2 in a tier above the rest, but I really think if you tiered these guys, it's Freeman, Goldschmidt, Guerrero, and then the next tier would be Alonso and Olsen, and then after that you're looking at 6 through 10 of, or not just 6 through 10, probably 6 through 17 or something of just a bunch of very good first basemen who all have an argument to be top 10. The Christian Walkers and the Josh Bell and Rhys Hoskins, all the 125 WRC plus hitters, right? They're all first basemen. That's what they do. They hit the ball.
Yeah. And Walker's kind of stands out because he's, again, like an elite defender. It's kind of,
but he's also not quite as good of a hitter, which is also what I put him on this list for, is his defense. The one guy that I didn't have on here that all of you had on here was Rizzo, actually, surprisingly enough. But it's not really a big difference, I don't think, between Rizzo and Walker, between Walker and Abreu, or even Walker and Lau, who we haven't Lau. I don't know Lau.
I don't think the guy.
I'm not asking you for pronunciation.
Yeah, I don't. I'm the last guy
at number 7, right? But you look down this list, and there's just so many good first basemen in the league right now. It's probably the deepest position in baseball. Maybe shortstop.
Yeah. I mean, shortstop. I mean, we're going to get to shortstop, but shortstop definitely is.
Shortstop's unbelievable.
Shortstop. I mean, it feels like every good prospect is a shortstop.
I think there are 16 top 10 first basemen, 16 top 10 shortstops in the league.
Yeah, it's kind of that position is going to definitely be a ton of fun, and we're going to make sure we have Jack on for that episode because I think you guys would love to have Jack explain our top 10 as well. But first base, I think I 100% agree, and kind of my final thoughts on the position. Ultimately, it's one of those things where, you mentioned Rizzo was the one guy you didn't have on your list. Like, Rizzo's probably the guy where it's like Rizzo, Abreu are both like, I could totally see them like just going out and having really good offensive years, but I can also totally see something falling apart, something going just wrong. Defense or the offense just isn't enough to carry with the rest of the rest of the guys. Walker's someone I feel like if I redid this list, I would have given a stronger consideration to. I think he would have been 11 on this. Hoskins is another one where it's like, I want to give Rhys Hoskins love. I think sometimes he gets lost in the shuffle, but he's a really good hitter. Josh Bell, I wonder how he'll do in Cleveland, kind of, with I think the best organization he's played with so far in terms of just like player development. Maybe that helps him a little bit. Those guys kind of love having their low strikeout, high walk, guys in their lineup. So maybe Josh Bell thrives there. But it's kind of my final thoughts on the position. Just very loaded outside of that, around that 10 to 15 range.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you look at just down the list, right? There were, let's do WRC plus. There were 15 guys at the position with a 120 or higher WRC plus last year. Arias is one of them. He's not playing first base this year, obviously. Joey Meneses is another one. I don't know if I exactly trust him to keep that up, but, we're looking at, 15 first basemen who can make an argument that are all top 10. And so
there are young guys like Casas can come. Like Casas was pretty good last year. You can come around, and if he's able to keep that over a full season, we're going to be talking about him next year. You know what I mean? So it's not like we're missing.
Yeah, or a guy like Jose Miranda.
Where he'll get a big role at first base.
Probably a DH. I don't know.
He can hit, and you just it's a matter of
Miranda's one of those guys that it doesn't really matter where, you're going to find him a spot because
right. Or even like Mountcastle can always kind of have one of those big years where he just goes on a home run spree. As you mentioned, Arias moving off the position. If Arias didn't get traded, we'd be talking about. I think he would have moved up I think he would have been here over Rizzo for me at least. So there are guys, man. It's this position just loaded. Like that's where you kind of throw all the guys that like you want to have in your lineup. You have your DH spot covered, but they can mash. So it's always a fun position. But yeah.
Yeah, that wraps it up for us. Thank you guys for listening, and we will see you in episode 79.